So first we recall the definition of exponents. 2 to the third, it means we multiply 3 copies of the base number 2. So this equals 2 times 2 times 2. And if we replace the base 2 with a variable, say x, and the meaning doesn't change, so we're still going to multiply 3 copies of the base, which is x in this case. So again, the definition of exponent is to multiply, and the exponent tells us the number of copies. So multiply 3 copies of the base. And in this case, the base is 2. But right here, we are going to multiply still 3 copies because the exponent is still 3. But this time, the base is not 2 anymore. It's the variable x. So we're going to multiply 3 copies of x. So that's the meaning of x to the third. So if we keep this in mind, we can simplify these expressions here. So for example, negative 5ab parenthesis 4ab. And notice in this expression, we don't see any symbols to tell us what the operation is, and except the minus sign. Again, the minus because there's nothing in front of it, so this actually means a negative number, negative 5. Now between negative 5 and a, there's nothing. Again, multiplication, when it's understood, can be omitted. So the symbol can be omitted. So if there's nothing, that means multiplication. So this literally means negative 5 times a and times b. Again, there's nothing here, means times 4 times a times b. So multiplication is the only one that can be omitted. So now we're going to multiply. Now, if we follow the order of operations, we're supposed to multiply what's in the parentheses, because P means parentheses. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. But in the parentheses, we have a number, a letter A and a letter B. If we don't know what A is, what B is, we cannot really multiply them. And so similarly for AB, we cannot multiply any of these. So inside the parentheses, there's nothing we can do. But when we look at them together, and there's a number negative 5 and 4, which can be multiplied. And the letter A and A, which can be multiplied, and B and B, which can be multiplied. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch things around, and we're going to put the numbers together, right beside each other, and the letter A and A beside each other, and B beside each other. And this is legitimate. It's because we have a property for multiplication. It's called a commutative property of multiplication. Commutative, what it means is you can switch two numbers or you still get the same answer. For example, we know 2 times 3 is equal to 3 times 2. We can switch the number 2 and 3, and they are still going to be equal to each other. So what I did here is I did a bunch of switching here. For example, first I switch 4 and B, and then I keep switching, and then I switch with the A. So eventually I will be able to put negative 5 and 4 together. And same thing, I can switch this A with the B here, and then I will have A and A together. So finally B and B will be together. So this is guaranteed by the commutative property. So now the next step, we can multiply what's in each pair of parentheses. The negative 5 times 4, a negative times a positive is negative. So we get negative 20. And what is A times A? And again, by the definition, and when we multiply 2 copies, when we multiply 2 copies of the same number or letter, we can write on the number we're multiplying, which is called the base, and we can raise a little 2 here, and to indicate that's the number of copies. Since we have 2 copies, and we're going to put 2 as our exponent. So A times A gives us a squared. Similarly, b times b gives us a b squared because we multiply 2 copies of b. So previously, what we did is whenever we have a squared, we have to expand it. Okay, this means multiply 2 copies of a. So we expanded to a times a. But now we have to also know how to go backwards. So if we have a times a, we need to be able to write it in the exponential form, keeping the base number a, and raise the number of times copies. So this is the answer. And notice right here, negative 20a squared b squared cannot be simplified any further because a squared, again, a squared and b squared, they are different letters. So if you take a look at the expanded version, we cannot say we have 4 copies of a letter because they don't match. We don't have 4 copies of A, we don't have 4 copies of B, we only have 2 copies of A and 2 copies of B. So these two cannot really be multiplied any further. All right, so next example, we have not only variables but also fractions in here. So first, recall definition of the rule to multiply fractions, which is multiplying straight across, so which we talked about when we learned how to multiply fractions with only numbers. And so the first step, this is what I did: top 4a times top 15b. The bottom will be 9b squared times the bottom 2ab. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on the numbers and try to simplify the numbers. So if the mixture of everything, because we have the numbers A's and B's all mixed in here, and if this confuses you, you could separate them. Let's take all the numbers out. So there's a top 4 times top 15. There's a bottom 9 times the bottom 2. And the variables, we can put them, there's a top A and top B, and there's a bottom B squared. And there's a and a B. So I am going to try to organize this a little bit. So I'm going to put them in alphabetical order. So I'm going to put this A first, and then I'm going to put B and B squared. The order doesn't really matter, so I can put a B and then put a B squared. Okay, so now I separated A's and B's. And this is not mandatory. If you are not bothered by A's and B's and the numbers together, you can go ahead and simplify from this expression. Okay, so now we're going to first try to simplify the numbers. And the 4 and the 9, they don't have anything in common, but 4 and the 2, they both have a 2 in common. So I'm going to go ahead and throw out a 2, which means dividing both numbers by 2. So now 4 is reduced down to 2, and 2 divided by 2 is, so 2 is reduced down to 1. And 15 and 9, since they both have 3 in common, I'm going to divide both numbers by 3. And 9 divided by 3 is 3, 15 divided by 3 is 5. And now if you look at the numbers, 2 and 3, nothing common, 2 and 1, 5 and 3, 5 and 1. So all the numbers have been reduced, and there are no more numbers that can be reduced. And you can go ahead and maybe, let's go ahead and write down the numbers left. So we have a 2, and there's a 5 at the top. At the bottom, we have a 3, and there's a 1. And if you want to go ahead and multiply them out to get 10/3, you can. Now let's look at the variables. And notice there's a top A and a bottom A. And these twos, and if you remember, we talked about it before, A represents a number. A number divided by itself always gives us 1. So these two can be crossed out because it literally gives us a 1. And same thing for B over B, and you will also get 1. So both of them will be turned into a 1. And so the bottom, there's another B squared. There's nothing we can do about it because we don't have another B. So and the top, notice they are turned into 1. It seems like we have nothing left, but if you remember, when we divide A by A, we're going to get a 1 here. We just didn't write it there. B divided by B, we're going to get 1, and 1 times 1 will still give us the 1 there. And usually the bottom ones, I didn't put them there because anything times 1 will beat us off. So I don't really, because even if I have a 1 here, b squared times 1 is still going to be b squared. So that's why the bottom one is not necessary. The only time you will put a 1 back is when you don't have anything. So now let's put them together. Since we have, for the numbers, we have the 10, a 10, and there's a top 1, and the bottom we have a 3. 3 times 1 is 3, and there's a b squared. And also 10 times 1 is literally 10, so we don't really need that 1 there. So that would be the final answer. But of course, if you are not bothered by everything mixed together, you could just go ahead and simplify here. So I'm going to just go ahead and do it right here to show you what we usually do. So we see a 4 at the top, we see a 2. So I'm going to go ahead and divide both of them by 2. So that gives me a 2 here and a 1 here. And 15 and 9, I'm going to go ahead and divide both of them by 3 because they both have 3 in common. So that's reduced down to a 3. This is reduced down to a 5. And for A's and B's, so since there's an A in the numerator and there's A in the denominator, I can go ahead and cross them out. And the reason we can cross them out is because A divided by A is 1, and the 1 is not going to make any contribution to multiplication. And then B and B can be crossed out, and then there's nothing, no more letters that can be crossed out. So now let's write down what's left. Oh, actually, this is the version that I kind of switched, put the numbers together, 4 and 15 together, and 9 and the 2 together, and the A's together, and B's together. I mean, again, this is optional. You don't have to do this if you can see all the numbers mixed in there. So after we reduce everything, as you can see, the top has 2 times 5, which gives us 10, and everything else is gone because see, 4 is reduced to 2, A is gone, 15 is reduced to 5, and B is gone. So you only have 2 times 5, that gives us 10. In the bottom, there's a 9 is reduced to 3, and the B squared is not reduced, and so we have 3B squared. But 2 is reduced to 1, and A is gone, B is gone. And that 1, we didn't really write it because 3 times 1 will still be 3. So that 1, you can just get rid of it. So that would be the final answer. So as you can see, if you don't separate them, it's going to look a little bit messy, but you have to make sure you write everything clearly. You can see which ones you have already crossed them out, which ones you still have it here. For example, this B squared will still be there. Now, next example, we're going to look at how we do division. And first of all, even though we're having numbers and variables, the format was still something over something divided by something over something. So it still looks like a fraction divided by another fraction. So if you recall the rules for dividing fractions, sorry, that should be division. The rule of division of fractions, that would be keep, change, flip. So we're going to keep the first fraction, the whole thing, and then we're going to change division to multiplication, and then going to flip the next fraction, top to bottom, bottom to top. So this is what we have now. So again, the first fraction, we got to keep it. We don't make any changes. And division, we're going to change it to multiplication, and then we flip top to bottom, bottom to top. So we got 9a now as our numerator, 20y as the denominator. So now this is turning into a multiplication question, which can be solved as the previous example. So again, if you want, you can, first of all, next multiplication of the rule of the multiplication of fractions will be straight across. So we're going to multiply the top and the top, and the bottom and the bottom. Now we can try to simplify the numbers and the variables. So again, we have to do them separately. First, let's look at the numbers. 20 and 5, nothing in common. 12 and 5. 12 and 20, they both have 4 in common. So I'm going to divide both of them by 4. So that gives us 3, and that gives us 5. And 9 and 5, they don't have anything in common. And so now we can move on to the variables. And notice that for the variables, we see they both have a and a. They can be crossed out. And y and y, they can be crossed out. Again, they don't have to line up because a divided by a gives us 1. Y over y gives us 1. If you want to put a bunch of 1s here, you can, but they're not really going to change the answer because anything times 1 would beat us off. So let's look at how we get this final answer. And notice that 12 is reduced to 3. So we're going to do 3. And be careful, x squared stood there. We didn't really do anything. So maybe you could rewrite this because right now it's very hard to see what is left, what is not, what is canceled. So you can see that we have a 3, x squared still there. Make sure you check everything. Y is gone, 9 is still there, and this a is gone. So that's the top. The bottom we have this 5. A is gone. 20 is reduced down to 5, so replace that with a 5, and y is gone. So now you can multiply 3 and a 9 to get 27 and keep that x squared. And the bottom, 5 times 5, that is 25. Sorry, there shouldn't be a y here. So that, because that y is already canceled.